people's head and watched as this was being done to teenagers. Is that criminal?
Well, the fact that this has been going on for months, I think is even worse now that we see this image, that we didn't even hear about this. But you're right, it is that energy. It's the energy of a kidnapped victim getting the bag over their head, tossed into the van. You're now in a criminal's custody. That's the same energy here. I mean, this poor girl, I guess not the only one. I mean, how many people have done this? This is elementary stuff. This is like, hey, you know, your mom says, don't put that plastic bag on your head. Don't run with knives. Don't stick your finger in a pencil sharpener. I mean, it's just total common sense. And yet, I mean, how do you even, I don't know if you've talked to doctors at this hospital. How many people work at this hospital that are watching people put plastic bags on their heads and not saying anything? How does nobody say anything about this for months?
I don't know. The administrator's name is Russell Tippin. He's probably a good guy to ask. I mean, what is going on under his leadership? I think that time's up on craziness. I think this COVID crazy phenomena, I think there's enough pushback in Texas that Governor Abbott even had to buckle to the pressure and say, okay, nobody's going to have to lose their job and to take the jab. But I can tell you, many people have felt coerced up until the last minute, and many people have received the COVID shot because they felt like there was no way out. And that could have been done months or even a year ago by the same gentleman who finally did that yesterday. And I think there's time for a change. I'll tell you, I had the pleasure of meeting and getting to know Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, who's running for governor. That's a gentleman who's going to bring common sense to anything that he's involved in. A war hero. He served our country on many levels, even a U.S. representative. He would be a great governor for Texas. And he's made it very public on social media that he's beaten COVID with nebulized budesonide and monoclonal antibodies, and there's a place for a different strategy than Fauci. Fauci said, shelter in place and wait for me to make a vaccine. That was the strategy at the very beginning, January 2020, that he told the whole world. And I thought, what? This is a rapidly mutating virus. There's no way that they're going to be able to make a one-time, one shot, even though that's kind of what was implied at the beginning. We have another rapidly mutating respiratory virus called influenza, and we don't get that right every year. As a matter of fact, we consider 40% success with that.
And we don't shut down the country and collapse the economy because of it and just go completely insane putting bags on people's heads in hospitals. But I really want you to weigh in on something else. We got about 2.5 minutes to break, because this is something that should have been the top story, and it kind of just came and went in a flash. We have had more cases of COVID, and they say more deaths from COVID since the vaccine than prior to the vaccine. What is your response to that? What does that signify?
I think there are many factors, but definitely the solution is not the vaccine. I was asked on a Friday if I would help with a project that's run by the Texas Division of Emergency Management, setting up a monoclonal antibody infusion center in Odessa across the street from this same hospital that these images of plastic over teenagers' heads is from. And at the infusion center, we infused 1,200 patients in 1 month. That was breakneck speed. And we caused that hospital census of COVID patients to go from 110 down to 42 in 1 month. And at the same time, every other person in that monoclonal antibody infusion center was angry they were there because they had been vaccinated, quote unquote. They had received their shots. They had done what they were told to do because they were told to do it. Just shut up and roll up your sleeve and do it because we say so. Your body, our choice. And so they complied. And now they're angry that they have, that they're sick, that they're elderly, that they have diabetes and high blood pressure, that they're at risk of dying from COVID. Why are they needing this infusion? And, you know, for even some federal leadership to say, to imply at one point that we shouldn't give the COVID or the monoclonal antibodies to those who have received the quote COVID shot, that's further betraying these people who did what you told them to do. And so I'm going to say, just by looking at the people in the infusion center, how many people were vaccinated that were angry they were there because it failed them. That the vaccine is not a winning strategy. There's a better way, which is what Colonel Alan West is talking about, early effective outpatient treatment, which is also Governor DeSantis's message. It's my message. We've always used early effective outpatient treatment for every disease. This is insane to tell us to hold our breath for a vaccine when the guy that was in charge of this, Fauci, has been in charge of trying to chase a vaccine for HIV.
All right, we're going to break now, and there's some other developing news on this that we'll get into with Dr. Richard Bartlett. Basically, there is no vaccine mandate. It's just a press release. There is so much developing right now that it's going to spur, or should I say accelerate, the mass awakening that's happening. But in response to that, the globalists, the criminals that think they own this planet are going to have a response of their own. And we are just in the middle of it right now, like being in the middle of the Hadron Collider or something. And so it's just incredible to have Dr. Bartlett on breaking this down, where they're putting bags on people's heads. We're about to have that family join us as well to talk about the experience. Apparently they're doing it normally. And so Alex Jones is on the line. Alex, you know, my head is spinning. I can't even believe this. Every day I was explaining it at the top of the broadcast. It's like every day I'm recapping the most epic Super Bowl of all time and just trying to break it all down. But it's every day. It just never stops, Alex.
Well, that's right. And I'm on a supposed vacation in Florida, but I just can't drag myself away. And I just want to say a few things to get off here quickly. So I know I've got a bad cell connection. You and Dr. Bartlett are doing a great job. I just wanted him to be able to elaborate on the fact that the mask in the studies I've seen boost levels of carbon dioxide a lot higher than they're supposed to be, and it can cause problems and headaches and some brain damage over time. But if you put a whole plastic bag over somebody, down to their chest or down to their stomach, that's going to recirculate carbon dioxide and is going to cause brain damage. I'd like him to speak to that, because the stories on Infowars.com, Paul Watson wrote about it, but Dr. Bartlett's confirmed this is going on. The hospital admits they do it. This just shows like it's a mass Milgram experiment or a Stanford experiment where they see how far they can push this. That's A. I wanted him to speak to that, and then I'll make it off. You guys have done a great job. And then B, more about these two young kids that went in to get a flu shot. They were given the COVID injection and both had serious heart problems. I mean, that is just amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the baton back over to you guys to see what you have to say. And thanks for coming on, Dr. Bartlett.
Yes, sir. Well, I'll tell you, number one, our immediate concern is low oxygen, hypoxia. And Alex is exactly right. The lungs exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen. And so when you get COVID and inflammation in the lungs, the swelling and the inflammation in the lung tissue, those 2 to 3 cell layers that are used to exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen have swelling in between those cells, and it's harder to exchange the oxygen. So people come into the emergency room short of breath, hypoxic, low oxygen. You want to give them oxygen, and you don't want to decrease their supply of oxygen. Putting a mask on or putting a plastic bag would be the opposite of giving supplemental oxygen. I have no explanation other than he touched on that on the second point. It seems like they're pushing as far. How far will we let them go? They're trying to figure out how far can they go with these issues. How much will we allow? And at this point, I think that Governor Abbott has heard enough is enough and decided to do what a political windsock would do, to say, okay, it looks like the polls are saying better do something different. And I'll tell you, it's evil to try to force people to take a injection or have a surgery or start taking medicines that have great risk without giving them a right to choose and weigh the risk and benefits. And this whole thing with the propaganda of telling, just do it, just roll up your sleeve because we say so, damn it, and not saying there's a risk. There is absolutely a risk. I've been the ER doctor taking care of my ER patients who have had strokes, Guillain-Barré syndrome, ascending paralysis, become pulmonary cripples as a result of the COVID shot, and other problems too. Transverse myelitis, an older lady who tried to stand up 2 hours after she got the shot, falls flat on her face, and is my patient in the ER. And she was on blood thinners. She didn't need that problem too. And so I think that it does seem like they're almost testing to see how far they can push us until we say no more. I'm not going to take it anymore. And there are enough people rising up. There is a global awareness, I believe, of what's going on that's rising up that is saying enough is enough. There's a line in the sand, and we really mean it. And don't cross that line. As a matter of fact, back up. And Alex has been a leader. Owen, you've been a leader on this. But the war isn't over, but there is a turning that's happening right now. And when they get this ridiculous to put plastic over teenagers' heads who are fighting for their breath, I think that they're outing themselves, that there's no science behind this. Show me the randomized controlled trial that this makes sense. A lot of things are said they just do a lot of things just because they're told to. But enough is enough. Respiratory therapists and nurses and doctors need to stand up and say, I'm not going to do that because it's not medically sound. It doesn't make sense scientifically. It's against my conscience. I'm not going to follow an order just because they tell me to. That's what happened with Nazi soldiers in World War II who just were doing their job. They were just doing what they were told. I'm just putting people on this railroad car. That's what I'm doing. I'm told to do it, so I'm doing it. And why is that okay? Because I was just following orders. Enough is enough. And I think that there are a lot of doctors and nurses who have been resounding that they're not personally going to get the COVID jab just because people say to. And they're willing to lose their jobs. And that was an imminent threat. Actually, I believe a lot of people did lose their job in Houston Methodist, if I think about it for a moment, like over 150, 160 who lost their job. We'll see how this turns out now that the governor said that you can't force private entities cannot force Texans to get the shot or lose their job. They lost their job. They were fired. Let's see how that goes.
Well, we already have a lot of legal battles happening right now, specifically here in Texas with our great Attorney General, Ken Paxton. But yeah, how is this going to go with all, I mean, it's thousands across America, but definitely here in Texas. How is this going to go where they've already laid off all these workers and nurses because of a vaccine mandate that doesn't actually exist? It was literally just a press release from Biden. There is no executive order. There is no law. There is no legislation. There's nothing except a press release, and yet everybody's enforced it. You also have Southwest Airlines that is stationed in Dallas, I believe, is their headquarters. They're mandating the vaccine for their pilots. But talk about the image of the woman with the bag over her head is a good optical illustration of the insanity for COVID. But talk about why we would force people to have medical procedures that they don't need. I mean, that's like somebody saying, okay, I'm 32 years old. I have a healthy heart. Well, we're going to give you bypass surgery, even though you don't need it. We're going to mandate it. Or we're going to give you a kidney transplant. You don't need it, but we're mandating it. Or, I mean, talk about the idea of medical procedures that are unneeded, unnecessary, and mandating that. This has never happened. I've never heard of this before.
It's never happened before. It's totally illogical. It's non-scientific. There is no science to back it up. We've never done these things before that are being done. It was all started. Some of these strategies were started in a communist state, in a communist nation, the most populous nation on the planet. And then those strategies were absorbed and touted and repeated by the World Health Organization and the CDC for the most part. But there was no precedent for this before. It was not science to wear a mask, a surgical mask for a respiratory virus of a flu outbreak 20 years ago, and certainly, the plastic over the head almost makes you